then.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the Festival of the Future. And this morning I'm delighted to welcome Leslie Grant from PA Consulting. And we're going to be talking to you about robotics in care, a moment of opportunity. I don't know if you've managed to catch any of the 64 sessions across the Festival of the Future from Dorset Council. There's been some great sessions, a few camp rules you'll see posted in the Q&A section that we've asked people to don't try recording. The sessions will be recorded and will be available to you. Mics and cameras will be muted, and if you can post any questions in the Q&A section and vote them up, we will try and get to them towards the end. Please share on social media using hashtag Futurefest, and do enjoy the session. So if we move on with the session, the agenda for the session, we'll quickly move through an introduction, have a little discussion about robotics in care report. We've got a video about cobots and their role in robotics in care. The project's briefs that we've developed in Dorset around cobots, and hopefully have some time for a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So we'll move into the introduction. So over the past couple of years, through continued support of our leadership, officers have been encouraged to take chances, look for innovation in the market, link with health partners and academia. There's a recognition that advances in technology, whilst not probably necessarily where we thought would be 30 years ago, is certainly in a place where it can make a difference. There's undoubtedly some great work being done in our own universities and R&D establishments, but to see robotics in action in the real world, all my searches took me to Japan, who seem to be probably 20 years ahead of the rest of the world in changing how we care for our ageing population. And here started sort of my problems really in communication, sort of collaboration, development with multinational companies on the other side of the world. Even in a digital age, it's quite difficult. We are still, I suppose, a small fish in a very large pond, and that's where the robotics in care community of interest came in. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Simon. Dorset joined the Robotics in Care Community of Interest group last year, which is hosted by PA Consulting, and we are one of 5 members that joined. We were joined by Bristol, Hampshire, Southend-on-Sea, and the City of York Council, and we've had, through the support and facilitation of PA Consulting, had the opportunity to be exposed to lots of establishments, organisations and research companies that develop this type of technology, and it's really sort of opened up new avenues and new windows to us to explore these opportunities. I'm going to hand over to Leslie now, who will take you through some of those opportunities.
Hi, thanks, Brian. Hi, my name's Leslie Grant. I work for PA Consulting, and I lead a lot of our care technology work in social care sector for PA. along with colleagues. And yeah, a couple of years ago, we established this Robotics in Care community of interest group, purely because in all our conversations with clients about the future of robotics and AI, I think we came across the same challenges and lots of misconceptions and misunderstandings, and not a lot of knowledge about what was out there and how it applied and could apply for the care sector. So we sought to kind of try and change that, and to try and really the aim was just to get a group of like-minded senior leaders who are facing the same challenges to look at how explore and promote the potential use of robotics to improve the lives of vulnerable people. And it was as simple as that, the kind of aim and objective originally. And so just by bringing those groups of people together and sharing ideas about what their challenges are and things that and robotics and AI solutions that they've tried, and with some success and some failures, and just really sharing those lessons. And also what we've tried to do is run sessions with a range of different stakeholders to try and join the dots across the care sector, but also across the robotics industry, about what technologies are out there, what's being developed that could be applicable within the care sector. So we've had sessions with Amazon Web Services, small tech developers like MySense and Service Robotics. We've visited academia, so Imperial Robotics Lab. We've heard from policymakers at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, from funding organisations like Innovate UK. So we've tried to share stories of success and challenges across different departments to try and foster a culture of collaboration and sharing and develop a consistent voice. And that's where what we're going to talk to you today about is some of the key messages that have come out of that first year of the Robotics in Care from all the leaders. We developed a shared report on what we think the opportunity is for social care and robotics. So just share some of the key messages in that. If we go to the next slide, please. And the next one. So Robotics in Care, we've co-developed a report which is called Robotics in Care, a Moment of Opportunity, and it really, that is what we're come to this conclusion, and through our sharing stories, is that we've all, whilst there's differences in the challenges between councils, and obviously there's specific population differences, that overall many are facing similar challenges. The median age of the global population has increased by 7 years over the past 3 decades. People's needs are increasingly more complex. We know that all councils have expressed that there are difficulties in recruiting, retaining and developing skilled staff and skilled workforce. We've got, we also have, I just lost my place. We've also got, the sector will need an extra 800,000 new care workers by 2035 to meet demand. There's a funding gap on top of that. We've estimated around 6 billion given the current investment levels, and that's pre-COVID. So those funding gaps, I'm sure will expect to rise. And then we've not even touched about wages. Wages are another real challenge. And so I think all those challenges together are kind of that perfect storm we talk about, that something needs to change. And I think all too often what people and the leaders said is that we often lean towards just traditional care solutions, like connected, monitored, pendant alarms. And I think the approach to more advanced technologies like both physical and social assisted technologies is overly cautious. And I think sometimes that means the care sector's adoption of such technologies, it lags behind some other industries, for example, in engineering. And I think it's, in terms of where that stems for, I think it's the sector's low appetite to risk. I think just historical funding pressures and time pressures. Instinctive response is always to stick with tried and tested solutions. that prioritise existing care delivery. And I think it's also driven by workforce demographics as well. We've got, a quarter of social care workers are aged over 55 with limited experience of advanced technology in the workplace. But I think the important thing to say here is that's not to say they don't want it or couldn't benefit from it. And I think that brings us on to the next slide about where we think there's a real opportunity now through COVID to change some of that. So we think that the impact of COVID is that there's a once in a generation opportunity. The pandemic's raised the prominence of care workers as they put themselves and their families at risk to support the most vulnerable. And I think it's also accelerated technology adoption, from care workers facilitating virtual engagement with families and care home residents to using care tech solutions to protect those shielding by reducing the need for physical visits. So I think there's now a real kind of opportunity now. We've seen that where councils and many of the councils in the robotics and care group shared their experiences of using existing technology innovatively during COVID. And this slide just gives you some examples. We've pulled out some of the existing tech that it's already out there and being developed that is probably most applicable within the care sector, and we could go on to talk some of those. We've got collaborative robots, which we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about because that's one of the projects that I'm leading at the moment with Hampshire County Council, and we'll share some of our learnings and show you a video about that and about how that could be applied in Dorset. Just for information, collaborative robots are also called cobots. They are a broad term of robots that kind of work in conjunction with a human. So in the care sector, the most advanced area is exoskeletons. So that's a kind of a device that's strapped around your lower back to give you physical support when moving and handling and twisting. And then you've got semi-humanoid robots, and they are kind of smart robots with human-like characteristics to engage people living with dementia. So you might have seen a few examples of these in the press. I think there's Peppa that's been trialled in care homes to deal with impact of isolation. So there's some real promise there. But obviously it's quite a different type of technology with a different purpose to cobots. Then you've got robotic animals, serving as companions, interacting with people. You've got digital assistants. Again, these aren't new, voice controlled devices that can make it easier for people to control their environment, so they can call for help or let someone in at the door. Medicine robots, again, not new. Automated medicine dispensers that remind people to take their medication and send alerts when a dose is missed. We've got examples of, this isn't new technology, but our colleagues in Norway have been involved in a kind of project where, because of the impact of COVID and not being able to send lots of carers out, they've rapidly deployed the use of medicine robots during the COVID pandemic to kind of reduce that kind of infection control and the number of people in people's houses. So that's been a kind of another example of deployment during COVID. And then you've got automated call services where you can make and manage calls to check on vulnerable people. Again, something that PA have worked with during the pandemic is working with Amazon Web Service to manage to reach multiples of vulnerable people in a very short space of time compared to what the requirement for real people making phone calls and making contact over a prolonged period. So there's some real examples there of existing technology that we think COVID has presented opportunity to deploy those at pace. So I think now is the time to sort of rethink and reset those traditional care service delivery boundaries. And if we go on to the next slide, I think our key message for all of this and with all the years is that we've got to adopt a bolder, more ambitious approach to trialling and deploying robot technologies. And to try and simplify the message here, we think there's three key messages. It's first, define your strategy based on human outcomes. trial technologies with the aim of deploying at scale, and collaborate. So we take these kind of points in turn. What do we mean by define your strategy based on human outcomes? That really is about focusing on problems that need to be solved and outcomes that you want to achieve, as opposed to just specific technologies. So don't start with the technology. Ask yourself questions like, how can we check on clients' well-being without carers having to go into people's homes? Or an example with Hampshire came to us for the cobots project. The question was not, what can cobot technology do? They didn't even know cobot technology existed at the point they came to us. It was, how can we prevent care workers injuring themselves at work or burning themselves out so that the workforce isn't depleted? They've done some analysis that showed that in the next 5 years they need an additional 6,000 care staff to deal with the increase in demand. And those staff don't necessarily exist. So how can we support those that do exist to make them more resilient? And that was the starting point, not the technology itself. I think the next bit about trial technologies with the aim of deploying at scale. I think you have to be bold here. You need clear leadership and ownership and direction. But you do need to think big, but start small and scale fast. So don't just see it as a trial for trial's sake. See it as a trial that you aim to then proceed to implementing. Believe in it, and believe that it may not be what you start out with, may not be what you end up with, but you've got to adapt as you go. And I think often we get stuck in the trial loop of there's so many issues and barriers that it's just seen as a failure. Don't try to win everyone around and solve all your problems at the outset. I think where you've got to recognise that sometimes you just need to make a start and ask yourself these questions. Are you embarking on something that's more complicated than you need at this point? Would a smaller, simpler proposal allow you to take that first vital step? And we, again, bringing it back to the cobots example, experience that time and time again. There are many barriers to these technologies because they are so new, and they represent a threat for so many people because they're uncertain. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be trialed, and that you can't learn a great deal from doing so. So I think the key message there is think big, start small, and scale fast. And don't. I think it's important not to get stuck endlessly discussing strategy and never getting to implementation. So do trial with the aim of implementing. And also, that doesn't mean just inventing new things all the time. You can repurpose things, and we talked about that in the previous slide about technologies that are already there, but just being repurposed in a time of need. And the third major key line in this is collaborate. I couldn't say this enough, and I think members of the robotics and care community of interest would agree with this, that even just by collaborating with other local authorities has broadened perspectives and enabled people to think differently. But I think it's collaboration beyond just the care ecosystem, and it's about linking up with other industry partners, academia, policymakers, SMEs, and a range of different bodies. That's really, really important, and that's what the Robotics and Care group does, is we try and link up those dots across those different organisations and boundaries, and because this is difficult stuff, and I don't think it can be done alone. And I think, again, during the COVID crisis, we've seen that, and I think Brian can give examples of some of that that's happened locally.
Yeah. As you say, Leslie, it is a moment of opportunity, and I think through necessity, the COVID crisis has demonstrated to us that we have had to come together, and we've seen local examples through sort of community shielding, that the local authority has come together with groups with representation from government, police, public health, and the voluntary community sector. all coming together to respond brilliantly to the crisis, and making sure that all our vulnerable residents are well looked after. So it certainly can be done, and with the sort of the ticking time bomb that we've got in informal unmet care and sort of wider care sector needs at the moment, we need to seize this sort of moment of opportunity. Take the relationships that we've built, the technology, the learning, and make a start, even if it is in just a small way to start with. But yeah, let's get started.
So the next, we're just going to introduce, if we go on to just the next slide, we're just going to introduce a little bit more about the cobots project, and because I know you've heard me talk about it a lot, and just we'll show you a video because it's much easier to explain when you've seen it in action rather than me trying to explain it or demo myself right here. Now if we just go on to the next slide, cobots they're an active kind of exoskeleton, as I say, they're worn around the lower back to support and protect the lower back when moving and handling. And Hampshire County Council have taken kind of a bold approach to this, and they want to see and test whether the cobots could help address their care workforce challenges and help make their care workforce more resilient. And this is bold because it's the first trial of its type in the European care sector, and as I spoke before, Hampshire didn't start with the cobot. They didn't know what a cobot was. They started with the challenge, and they've looked at lots of different ways of trying to address this challenge in recruitment. So but none of those have seemed to work. So they're looking at what can technology do, and particularly robotics. And this technology we're using is from a Japanese robotics developer called Cyberdyne. We have looked to test it with about 18 care workers and many more service users across a range of care settings. And let's be, these devices are worn by the care worker to support them. They can also be worn by a service user, and Cyberdyne use them a lot in Japan for stroke rehabilitation. So they've got a dual, the way that they work is they've got sensors built into them, and that read your body patterns and body accesses when you move, and they convert those into motion and support you in moving. But in terms of, they also have electrodes that you can fix to the muscles on your back that read signals from your brain to your muscles and convert them into motion. And that's particularly useful for patients recovering from stroke, to improve that sort of their motion and their muscle movement and the support that it gives them. So there's a dual functionality. What we've been testing in Hampshire is how that can be used to support care workers with heavy, complex personal care, repositioning, lifting, and moving and handling. So I'll not talk any more about it, and we'll show you the video now so you can see what it is, and then we can talk a little bit more about it.
years now, Hampshire County Council has been very actively working in the technology-enabled care space, and we're really keen to innovate in terms of capitalising on the opportunities that we get through the use of different technologies to support people. What we're doing at the moment is a really exciting trial in terms of the use of collaborative robots, cobots for short, which essentially are exoskeletons worn by carers to provide care for people in a range of different settings. That's what we're trialling. We don't quite know what the trial will show us, but we're really excited in terms of what's starting to come through at this very early stage in terms of carers using devices and feeling really supported and enabled in their caring tasks. Now for us, that's vital in terms of the care workforce. It's very precious, it's quite finite, it turns over in terms of people entering and then exiting on a fairly regular basis. We believe that use of this technology will lessen the risk of injury to individuals. That hopefully retains a workforce. It means that there's continuity of care for service users. So those are some of the things that we're hoping to see through this trial. We're not quite sure though where it will end up, but I'm really, really pleased that we're working with our technology partner PA Consulting and the Argenti Partnership to roll out and to test really to the point of what are the opportunities, the use of collaborative robots.
I come in to work, I then go into a locked cupboard where the cobot's kept, and then I make sure I've got a battery that's charged. I then open the back bit where the battery goes, and I've got to make sure I click it in twice to make sure it's on. I then turn it on to make sure it's actually connected, and then I literally put it on. It's really quick to do. It takes me about 10 to 20 seconds to put on.
The task that I find it more helpful wearing it is definitely repositioning residents, rolling, moving position in the bed.
With residents that may need a little bit more support, I feel like I can roll them and support for a lot longer.
I was able to really see a difference, like working with service users, wearing the cobot and not wearing the cobot. So when we were doing heavy moving and handling positions, the support I got from my back was absolutely amazing.
It makes me think about what I'm doing. So if I wasn't wearing this, I would probably outbend or twist in a way that I shouldn't. But to have this on, it's, you know, makes me think actually before I move, how am I going to move first? So if I'm helping someone with socks or shoes, or even just picking something up from the floor, although it takes that few seconds longer, it's doing my body a world of good.
Our first call is normally a wash. We can shower with them. They're waterproof, so it's quite handy when I need to get right down low to do the bottom half of the body.
We've obviously got a lot of service users here that are in wheelchairs. Pushing wheelchairs can obviously cause real pain to your backs. I noticed personally myself when I was pushing a wheelchair, sometimes I had to kind of almost give myself a run up to go. Whereas in the cobot, I can just go straight into the push. To show you how it supports us, we've got this little thing, we call it the ragdoll effect. So if Emily sets it to the highest level and then tries to bend down, you can see how the cobot is preventing her going down any further, causing pain to her lower back. So if I now turn the cobot off, you can see how she falls like a ragdoll.
The service users have been very, very interested in this piece of equipment. We were a bit worried because some of our residents do have dementia and other conditions. We thought they might be a little bit, apprehensive, a bit nervous, a bit scared, but they've been really interested. They've been asking questions. It's been very positive.
When the residents see this, they're like, oh, it's clever, it's a brilliant idea.
For me, from an OT point of view, if we were delivering care to somebody, it could be that additional tool that we could put in place to enable the care to be delivered in a much more timely, efficient and effective way.
People do feel sometimes that care is a hard task, a hard job with heavy movements, etc. So having a piece of equipment that would look after a care worker, support them in their daily life to prolong their journey in care is a win-win.
The first and second time I wore it, yes, it was weird because obviously I wasn't used to it, but now I'm so comfy with it. It does feel like an exoskeleton. It just feels part of my body.
One of my colleagues actually wore their cobot all day. After her shift, she actually said, I'm ready to do a whole nother shift.
I sleep better because I'm not aching. The whole day hasn't been like weighing down on my shoulders or my back, and it feels good.
Right, yeah, great piece of evidence of the cobots in action there, and thanks to Mark and Graham from Hampshire for letting us share their video. Just moving into section 3 now. So the evidence and the use cases that we want to develop in Dorset. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Simon. So the challenges facing Dorset, with mounting pressures on budgets, we can't afford not to be considering technology really. In Dorset, the increase in the 65 plus population is tracking about 1.8% per annum at the moment. Working age population continues to decline. The impacts on the age-related issues will be amplified in the future as we continue to track 10% above the national average in an aging economy. National average at 18%, that's 28% of the Dorset population is in that 65 plus bracket at the moment. Impact of COVID, that may reduce the number of people wanting to be employed in that sort of close contact, where close contact is inevitable. For carers getting older themselves, moving and handling injuries, they don't generally go away. Sort of lower back pain and that type of injury that's related to moving and handling, they're usually around for a long time. For carers, talking to care providers and agencies about reducing double-handed care, i.e. doing more for less as demands grow and pressures increase. It's difficult, so we have to present some viable and sustainable alternatives such as technology, and equally to consider the service users' needs and expectations. Preserving dignity, respect for our clients has to be paramount at the outset for this. We had transformation plans that over the last few years, and we've been looking at how we can reinvigorate the adult social care in Dorset. But as Mike Tyson once said, a plan's great until you get hit in the face, and COVID is certainly a punch in the face. So we're reimagining our plans and looking at where we can bring technology, assistive technology, cobots into this mix. I think they're going to be vital for the future. So over to Leslie and what we are talking about doing with cobots in Dorset.
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, we in following our role in robotics and care community of interest with Dorset, Dorset asked us to do some project scoping of how we could potentially use cobots in Dorset. So trying to explore a range of different scenarios and potential use cases. And if we just go to the next slide, please. I think what we talked about earlier, when looking at how we could use things, I think it's really important to take a step back always and try and keep asking ourselves the questions like, how is this addressing the problem that we want to solve? Is it addressing the major problem, or is it trying to address something else? What are the potential barriers to successful trial, and can they be overcome, and how do we sort of chunk those up? Is the problem relevant to Dorset Council or something others should be solving? So are we trying to make this too big and complicated, or is it how much of it's in our control? And I think that's a really important one. And also, how quickly do we need to find a solution, and is now the right time? So particularly in COVID, some might see this time as not the right time, and yet others, as we talked about, it might be absolutely the right time to seize the opportunity and to work very differently. And also just always asking us, what does a good outcome look like? So these are the questions we sort of kept in mind when talking to a broad range of stakeholders. So if we go to the next slide, what we've looked at is Brian's asked us to look at a range across this Dorset's health and social care system. And so we've looked at around 6 potential cases in social care and a couple in health. And so if we just kind of walk through those, we've got an opportunity within residential homes. You know, can it make care delivery easier, reduce carer kind of burnout and sickness and overall attrition? There's an opportunities within day centres for domestic assistance, particularly maybe service users with multiple learning disabilities. How could the cobot help those people? Then there's within the reablement space, and that reablement is also promoting independence. Can it help those care workers deliver care easier, more independently, again, to promote that independence ethos? Then there's the opportunity within informal carers, so unpaid carers. And as we know, during the COVID crisis, that group of carers have got even more demands on them than ever if they've decided to not have formal carers come into the home. You know, so there's the question of how does the cobot help those informal carers, and can it prevent or delay or reduce the need for formal care in the future? So really looking at it as a preventative, in the preventative space. And then there's the domiciliary care market. I know that Dorset's already made great strides in kind of right sizing a lot of their care packages in domiciliary care, but kind of further efficiencies be made on single-handed or double-handed to single-handed care with a cobot. And the final one is really a variant of that, like can the job be made easier or reduce the need for additional carers for those really complex multi-carer cases, which we know not just within Dorset are increasing, but across the nationwide, more and more complex needs with multiple carers. So we looked at those, and then in the health space, we looked at kind of quite innovatively, as I mentioned before, the cobot by Cyberdyne can actually be worn by patients recovering from stroke for rehabilitation purposes. It uses electrodes to improve that kind of muscle, the motors in the muscle and that muscle retention. And so there was a question, could we scope something out in that domain? And then similarly still within the health domain, but for physiotherapists, similar to care workers, a very intense physical job, can it make the job of a physiotherapist easier? And I think when going through all of those cases, there's clearly lots of opportunities of where the cobots could be applied, but we've got to be quite brutal with ourselves and asking those questions I talked about in the previous slide. And I think if we go to the next slide, and Simon, what we tried to do is really try and prioritise where we think the most potential is within Dorset, for Dorset Council to have succeeded in potentially deploying cobots or trialling them. And I think in dismissing some of the cases, one of the main drivers is particularly within institutional settings like care homes or day centres, and within health is really around COVID at the moment. Just because what we found as well when we were trialling the cobots in care homes when COVID hit, obviously it's hit care homes quite significantly. So it may not be the right time to work in care homes at this point. However, our experience and learning from Hampshire, when we then used the cobots in the community, deployed with care workers to help address them, either work more independently, maintain effective social distancing by delivering care more independently, cobots were seen to be quite effective. So we think the use cases for Dorset to focus on would be in reablement and encouraging that reablement ethos of independence. So can it make care delivery easier? Informal care, we think there's a real opportunity here for it to sort of prevent or delay that need or support carers in their daily care needs. And domiciliary care, again, Dorset's made great progress here. Let's look at a programme where you build on that using technology to take it to the next level in terms of transformation in that space. So I think those are the kind of areas we think Dorset should focus on. And if we just go to the next slide is quite a busy slide. I don't mean to talk you through every single bit, but the key requirements in setting out a pathfinder of this type is things to kind of be aware of is what are the objectives? Be absolutely clear. So I think, you know, can it make an impact on, and I hate to always bring it back to that, on the financial pressures, which we know there are many. Can it enable more effective and efficient care delivery? Can it spearhead a positive culture around the future of care technology and kind of address some of those threats that are there and those misperceptions possibly around robotics in care? And also using it as an opportunity to learn, like we talked about what the operational requirements are for deploying technology at scale. And then being clear on the measures of success. What is, for example, is there an impact? Are you able to reduce care from maybe 2 carers to 1 carers? Is there an impact on care staff in terms of levels of fatigue or perceived kind of aches and pains or their confidence? And what's the impact on service users? As we saw in the video, many service users were really positive and curious about it. So it'd be good to kind of understand their experiences. And also the impact on health and care providers themselves, so the managers and their teams and the way they run their organisations. So we need to identify use case owners to really drive it through. And the stakeholders we look at and to manage are the service users and their families, the care workers and the carers, the registered operational managers and all the professionals, so moving and handling experts. With any project like this, governance is key. We need to have that care governance, that moving and handling kind of risk assessment. You need that kind of health and safety, infection control element to it. Legal and procurement in terms of negotiating contracts with a foreign technology supplier and procuring the devices, contracting with care providers. And then there's the whole service user and care consent to take part and things like that. And then in evaluating, you've got lots of different things to try and gather as much information as possible around care worker diaries and logbooks, using surveys, using focus group, doing formal observations with occupational therapists. And just thinking about what skills you need to kind of run these pathfinders. So you need a cobot or trained specialist, a real lead that becomes that expert in that area. You need that OT input, moving and handling expert. You need operational and logistics and technical support to deal with any technical queries and just transporting devices, and also just that legal contractual skills just in terms of negotiating with commercial bodies. That's the sort of slight difference with this and a challenge for local authorities is moving into that commercial space on things and so that's a snapshot of the different requirements for a pathfinder and how we sort of summarise that for Dorset. So in essence, there is an opportunity, but as we said, just got to be clear about the outcomes and what Dorset are seeking to achieve through this. So we'll open up for questions. I'm sure there's many, and thank you.
Yes, thanks everyone for your time, and yeah, happy to take any questions. We have got a couple of minutes left, I think. So just have a look what's gone live. So loving the stories of the care workers, great video. Really good session. Okay, I'm not seeing any specific questions coming through, and we are actually bang on time. So So yeah, we will wrap the session up. Thanks very much, Leslie, for giving us your time and helping us to put the session together. Please book onto to more sessions for the Festival of the Future if you have time today. Follow us on Twitter and hashtag using Futurefest. I will copy that into the chat now, into the Q&A section now. And have a great festival. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.